Penguin Random House Audio presents The Go-Giver Leader, a little story about what matters most in business. Previously published as It's Not About You, by Bob Burg and John David Mann. Read for you by Bob Burg and John David Mann, with Anna Gabriel Mann. Introduction. A few years after The Go-Giver first appeared, an idea occurred to us. By this time, our little story about a powerful business idea had traveled around the globe in translation and gathered quite a following here in the States. Companies large and small were using the book to create a go-giver culture and increase their business. We had put out a second book, a nonfiction companion volume titled Go-Givers Sell More, which featured vignettes of a few dozen people's real-life experiences to address the question, this all sounds great, but do things really work that way in real life? The answer, in a word, is yes. Bob was training people around the world to become certified go-giver speakers. Schools were even starting to use the go-giver in classrooms, and we were starting work on a go-giver curriculum guide for teachers. A lot was going on. And yet it felt like Pindar still had more to say. Pindar, of course, is the mysterious mentor character from the first book, the one who introduces our struggling hero Joe to the 5 laws of stratospheric success, which all revolve around the idea that a giving mindset is the key to a rich and fulfilling life. One of those 5 laws is the law of influence, which says that your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. We thought Pindar would want us to expand on that he and his friends would have something to say about leadership. With so many great books and teachings on leadership already out there in the world, we asked ourselves, was there a compelling reason for us to add to the pile? Well, what would Pindar say to that? He would support those great books and their teachings for sure. And yet, Pindar being Pindar, he would also add his own perspective to the question of what makes great leadership. No doubt turning conventional thinking on its head and finding something paradoxical at its center. As he says in The Go-Giver, inside every truth and every appearance, there's a bit of opposite tucked inside, just to keep things interesting. During those years, quite a few readers had also been asking us, how do go-giver ideas work in the realm of leadership? What does a go-giver leader look like? This book is our effort to answer that question.
We wrote this story and published it in 2011 under the title It's Not About You. This title seemed to nicely echo the core idea of the go-giver, that shifting one's emphasis from getting to giving, from a me focus to an other focus, leads to greater and often unexpected returns. Made perfect sense. Or at least we thought it did. That wasn't how others saw it, though. Many read the title, It's Not About You, and thought, well, if it's not about me, I suppose there's no point in my reading it. We soon realized that the book's title didn't make clear what the book was actually about. So our incredibly supportive publishing partners at Portfolio Penguin agreed to let us retitle the book and give it a new cover, creating the audiobook you're now listening to. We've also made some revisions to the story itself, especially in its concluding chapters, and in Ben's 5th and final key to legendary leadership. This has allowed us to better capture in words just what it was that Ben finally learned, what lies at the heart of Pindar's leadership secret. We are thrilled to be able to bring the true heart of the story to light and share it with you. Because the truth is, it is about you. It's about you and about what happens when you focus on making it about others. It's about how the best way to increase your own influence is to give it away. Pindar's paradox. This little story is about some big ideas, vision and empathy, influence and character, loss and triumph. Yet the best of these are but words and abstractions until they are breathed to life through flesh and blood experience. That's where you come in. You may not be a CEO, prime minister, or president. You may not be the head of your organization or boss of your company. But even if you don't happen to occupy a traditional leadership position, that doesn't mean you're not in a position to influence others, to inspire and empower others, to be the catalyst for others' greatness, to champion their success, to hold them up. In other words, to give leadership, and in so doing, to nudge the world in a positive direction. Bob Burg and John David Mann.
Chapter 1. Taking Leadership. Ben had a reputation as someone who ran hard, did his homework, and knew how to go for the close. He had brought in accounts by the dozens, individual clients by the score. There were some who said he might be executive material. He was, they said, a guy who knew how to take leadership in tough circumstances. Still, he'd never faced a situation quite like this before. As Ben emerged from the parking garage, he blinked in the bright September sunlight. "You've got this, Ben," he murmured as he set off down the street. "This is going to be a piece of cake." He arrived at the address he'd been given, a sturdy old brick building that took up half the city block. He squinted and looked up. There it was, inscribed on a large brass plate riveted onto the brick facing above the entrance. Allen and Augustine, makers and marketers of fine chairs. "Piece of cake," he repeated as he stepped through the gigantic oak doors and into the foyer, where he was greeted by the scent of wood shavings, leather, and varnish. Allen and Augustine had fallen on hard times. That was why Ben was here. The conference room was filled with some 24 people milling about and talking in hushed tones. Ben was the only outsider. He moved through the group, shaking hands, meeting the members of Allen and Augustine's executive team and exploratory committee. As he reached the head of the table, he saw 2 chairs and, standing by them, Allen and Augustine's 2 co-chairmen. He was introduced first to a slender, soft-spoken gentleman, Allen, co-founder of the company, who greeted Ben quietly, and then the barrel-chested man standing next to him, who gave Ben a warm welcome and a 2-fisted handshake, Allen's brother Augustine. Next, he met a burly man with tree-trunk hands. This was Frank, VP of Production. Frank said not a word, giving only a terse nod. Finally, Ben was introduced to the VP of Finance and Personnel, Karen, a petite woman with dark, intelligent eyes. "So this is Ben," she said. Ben couldn't quite decide whether she seemed hostile or just cautious. If he could influence these 4 executives successfully, Ben knew he'd have the company. He had to win them over, to convince them. In a word, to conquer them. "Let's not kid ourselves," he'd muttered to his reflection in the mirror that morning while shaving. "This is a battlefield." In his 12 years with the Martin Group, Ben had moved from sales to sales management to division manager. Now, at the tender age of 34, he had been promoted to a position, on probation, in the firm's highly competitive mergers and acquisitions department. Ben's task was to lead the transition, a smooth transition, as the boss had emphasized when giving Ben the job just 3 days earlier, with this newly acquired company, helping them become a successful, productive part of the Martin Group, one big, happy family. Except that the newly acquired company wasn't actually acquired yet. And that was Ben's charge, to persuade the owners of Allen and Augustine that this merger was in their best interests. And because all of Allen and Augustine's roughly 500 employees had been given generous employee stock ownership plans, they were the owners. All Ben had to do was get 500 people to lay down their arms, so to speak, and see things his way. No, he'd never faced a situation quite like this before. The babble in the room quieted to a hush as they all took their seats. After a brief introduction, Allen turned the floor over to Ben. Ben put on a firm yet friendly smile. Time to take command. "Makers and marketers," Ben began slowly, deliberately, "of fine chairs, all made of premium wood, all hand-designed, all exquisite. When you sit in an Allen and Augustine chair," he was now quoting from their ads, "you don't just feel supported, you feel held." In fact, that was the company's slogan, "We hold you up." Ben couldn't help thinking what a hokey motto that was. "Tiny chairs for tots, tykes, and nursery nooks," he continued. "Big, bold boardroom chairs, classic country kitchen chairs, elegant straight-back dining room chairs, cozy deep-cushioned settin' chairs for grandparents, comfy rockers for nursing moms." the chairs that help.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?